Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Suzanne Park, who is a contemporary romance writer, and she writes some stories for young adults. And actually, Suzanne, for readers unfamiliar with your work, could you describe what you write?
Yes, no problem. So I'd like to say that my books are a blend of coming of age or self-discovery and love stories. They're contemporary, usually feature protagonists that are of Asian American descent. And the most recent book that I released this year also featured a Korean American protagonist and a Chinese American love interest.
Ah, yes. So, can you, what can readers expect from your newest book?
Well, I try not to look at too many reviews, but when you're tagged in them or you receive trade reviews or industry reviews, you do look at those, and a lot of them talk about my homage to mall culture, and I really think that that really is something that's unique about this book. So, the Christmas Clash is right over there.
Mhm.
It's a young adult contemporary, and it features two protagonists. One's Korean American. Her name is Chloe, and Chinese American Peter Lee, and they work at the Riverwood Mall together. She works as a elf photographer at Santa's Village, and he works in the virtual reality North Pole extravaganza down the way. And they are rivals. They don't like each other. The families also don't like each other. Their families own food court restaurants, Korean and a Chinese restaurant, and they are always feuding. And they find out, Chloe and Peter find out that the mall is going to close, and they actually have to work together to save the mall.
Ah, okay. And you also have another book coming out.
Yes, this just came.
Just
It's an
come out.
advanced reader copy. I'm trying not to knock everything down, which I sometimes do on my head. This is called The Do Over. And this book is coming out in April of 2023. It seems so far away, but it also seems like it's sneaking up. The Do Over is about a Korean American consultant and author. Her name is Lily Lee. And she finds out during a job background check that she didn't actually graduate from college, and she has to go back to college 10 years later to finish her college degree. And while she's there, she finds out that her college ex-boyfriend is her computer science TA. And so it's a coming of age, or it's a self-discovery meets love story, and it's a book about second chances and a fish out of water story.
Aha. So what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
Usually, when people find my books, it's usually because they're looking for a kind of a comfort read or something that is lighthearted and humorous, but also has, and then they're surprised to find out that there are serious topics included. And I think it was Publishers Weekly that said that I like to couch serious topics with humor to make them easier to swallow. And I believe that that is probably the most accurate thing I've ever heard of how my writing could be described, where I do that on purpose, where I try to make stories entertaining and lighthearted and fun to read. Try to make them pretty fast paced. And then when you actually peel back the layers, you do see that there are other topics that I touch that, if you're looking for a deeper read, you might discover other things as well.
Hmm. Now, your characters are basically all Asian Americans. And have you gotten any feedback on that?
Yes, for the most part, in general, generally speaking, I have a lot of folks from the Asian American community who have told me that they really appreciate that they have a voice now of somebody that gets that Asian American characters can be very three dimensional. When you see stock characters on TV or in the movies. They're usually are kind of the side character. They aren't given much development, and they don't really have these well-rounded background and stories to tell. And I think what I've done is try to portray people in a way that hasn't been done before. And also, because I make the actual stories, for the most part, they're humorous. That's also not necessarily something you see that often either in literature or on screen, where people can have joyful, marginalized characters can have joyful, happy endings and not have a ton of trauma in their lives, not have this huge culture clash. There's not these huge immigration stories in my books. Not that there's not a place for that. There's plenty of books and a lot of literature and a lot of media out there that cover that. But there's also more to the Asian American diaspora. And I feel like I'm trying to make sure that part is heard too. And then when I talk to people who actually either know people who are Asian American and wanted to know more about the culture, or they don't actually know anybody, and this was sort of eye-opening to them, usually through sort of the relationships between the main character and their parents, or it's through the discussion of food and culture through food that they're brought into the story. And I've gotten a lot of wonderful reception to that as well. And so I really think because my characters, I have, this will be my 6th book out, and I try in every book to make sure the characters are different, their voices are different, and their stories are told and they're not identical, so that more of the Asian American diaspora is represented. I feel like it's something I'm doing personally because I think it's important, but it's also a lot of pressure to try to have as much representation as I do include, because I want to make sure, whether it's a 2nd generation story, or 1st generation or 3rd generation, that those stories are out there now. And I feel like it's very important for somebody like me who has the ability to write these stories, who can get published, and who has a growing platform, to make sure that I am telling these stories.
I think that's great. Now, do you find, though, that a lot of the issues that your characters have are the same as any other, growing up, kids growing up, and other romance, other people having romances?
There's a lot of things that are similar, especially in the young adult space. I've had people who told me, that I think the most memorable and the feedback I've ever gotten from a reader was with Sunny Song Will Never Be Famous, that pink book right there. I had a character, I had a reader come and email me and say that they read the book. They didn't know anything about it except they liked the cover. And because the book is about social media and how this main character actually gets in trouble, her video of hers goes viral, and she's sent to a digital detox camp in the middle of Iowa on a farm. And she has to basically go offline for the whole summer. This reader, she's in high school, she wrote me and said that she, for the first time, really thought about her choices and what her options were. And she put her phone down and joined the lacrosse team. And she's now doing things that she's never done before, because the book let her know that it was possible. And, this is not a Korean American person, not an Asian American person, just somebody that connected to the story. And I do want to make sure that people see that, these stories are not just like a niche book. It's like these are universal. There's a lot that is relevant to kids today, or adults who are reading my adult contemporaries.
Exactly. Yeah. So what was the inspiration for your latest book? Either one, your newest one, the one that's not out yet, and or the Christmas Clash?
Well, the Christmas Clash came from, let's see. So I wanted to write I did want to write a holiday romantic comedy, and my publisher was working with me trying to, think of what I could write about. So I was
Mhm.
trying to think like what to me screams holidays. And of course, the mall
Mhm.
ran in my head. And I thought to myself, okay, I at least now know what it's going to be about. Let me look up my childhood mall. And when I did that, I found out that my sister sent me a link too while we were looking this up that my childhood mall was going to close. And it made me really sad. And I realized like I have to write this book, right? Because it's an
Mhm.
homage to my childhood mall. I basically grew up in that mall. And
Yeah.
so I finished the story, and it was, I think a lot of mall stories that I've read seem to talk about the past and the mall culture and kind of um, a kind of poking fun at mall culture. And I believe my book is an homage more than poking fun because I do love them. I do love malls, and I do feel like that was an important part of my upbringing. So I finished the book and I turned it in, and then I looked up the mall to see when it was going to officially close. And I found out that the mall was saved by a regional developer, and they were just going to renovate parts of the mall and update it, and that the
Wow.
mall got saved. And it was like a happy ending, and that made me super happy because that means like my mall actually got happily ever after.
Oh, wow.
um on the contrary, this book came from a nightmare.
Oh,
Very different.
really?
Yes, so I kept having during the pandemic, uh through anxiety, stress, whatever, I kept having this dream where and it's a common dream where somebody you wake up and you realize you have to take a final exam for a course you actually haven't gone to any classes for. And so all of a sudden you're on the hook to take this final, life-changing exam for a course in a subject you don't know anything about. And the stress around that. And I wake up in a panic, and I thought, oh, I'll just journal about this feeling because it's very, it's a dream I used to have and it came back. And then once I started journaling, I just realized maybe this could be a story. And so, that's how this book came to be. I wrote a story about this woman who has actually had that same dream and is seemingly very successful to the outside world. And then she finds out, and she's writing a book about being a success and getting your dream job. And then all of a sudden, she finds out that she is a fraud. Like she does not have what it took to get her final her diploma, and then she has to go back to school. So she has imposter syndrome, a lot of anxiety, um, and I talk about that as a situation that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring humor to it, but also shed light on the topic so that people don't feel alone when they have these feelings.
So, what kind of research went into writing either one of these books? Choose one.
The Christmas Clash, I'll talk about that one since it's
Okay.
most, it's currently out.
Okay.
That one was, of course, I had to go to a lot of malls and eat at a lot of food court restaurants because that was essential.
Oh, God.
Because there's a lot of food mentioned, and mall food mentioned in this book. So that was fun. I did go to a lot of malls though, both the older type of malls, the newer ones, and then I actually went to my childhood mall when I was back in Nashville last year just to take pictures and to walk around just to make sure I really understood the environment and the ambiance. And so a lot of that is reflected in the book. The other thing that I find important in my books, and not everyone does this, because sometimes when you include books with romance in it, it can have a little bit of a, um, you know, what is it? It's a little bit of fantasy involved where it's not like things just happen to fall into place a lot, and it just works out, and that's kind of how you kind of get to that happily ever after, because things do need to fall into place almost perfectly sometimes. With my books, I try to add a little bit of agency on the character side, but make sure whatever they're I do like, first of all, I do like to put a lot on them, meaning like I don't make their lives easy. So again, with this book, The Do-Over, for example, I could have just left it as, oh, she has to go back to college and that's very tough. But then for her to have this one critical course that she has to finish, and her TA is her ex-boyfriend who is now in charge of her fate, like that to me sounded terrible. And I thought that was really, it would be great for a book. So what I want to do is to make sure that the character is able to overcome obstacles and figure stuff out, as a person would go about doing it in real life. So it's a very realistic ways of them solving the problem. Sure, things have to fall in place too, and things work out as well. But how they get there is not sort of magic. It's not, suddenly superpowers or all of a sudden, just by some crazy things, they get a windfall of money. It's just, to me, I just want to make sure there's a realistic element to it. So for this particular situation, when they have to figure out how to save them all, how would you go about saving them all? So the characters really dig into leases, for example, trying to look for some sort of legalese that is in favor of the tenants, something that they would catch that might mean that they have more time, something like that. I thought was kind of a way that, a realistic person would come about it. And in doing that, I talked to my friend who is a lawyer in Nashville who has had has a commercial background. And so I talked to him about, okay, but is this possible? And I know this is a little bit more absurd, but is this possible? And so I was just trying to get to this right way of solving the problem that seems like a 16 or 17-year-old could actually do on their own without having a law degree, without having, some magical thing happen where it all everything just worked out.
Okay. So what was your favorite research story of all the books that you've written?
My my favorite research story is probably for my adult debut novel, Loathe at First Sight. It's a book about the gaming industry. And it's funny because after the book released, a year after, is when a lot of controversy hit the gaming world, specifically in the way that I described it in this book. So a lot of people who had read the book into 2020 were like, some of them said, this doesn't seem very realistic for a work environment. Like, I know people who work in gaming, this would never happen. And they were always talking about the men in gaming, not the women in gaming. And then a year later, all of this stuff transpired that, made a lot of these gaming companies exposed to all the things that were going on behind the scenes. And so what I think is probably the wildest part of this whole thing was that I actually, when I got the idea to write the book about the gaming industry, I took a tour of one of the gaming companies that were in the hot seat, Activision Blizzard. I don't know if they're hyphenated, but anyway, I took a tour of their headquarters in Southern California. And one of the employees, a friend of mine, just kind of walked me through the offices. And it was literally what I saw is what is in the book. And again, I had people tell me it wasn't realistic. I was like, I have pictures. I actually was in, this room that they have as their critical, where a lot of the, all their metrics are. And, just it's just funny because to me, it seems, of course, you would include, that type of information if you have the ability to actually be there and see it and feel it, and it feels very real to you. And people who either weren't in gaming or thought they knew better than somebody who had actually been there, had some thoughts too, but it wasn't. But yeah, mine was based on reality. And I interviewed a ton of people too in the gaming industry, both men and women in the gaming industry. And so a lot of the things that they told me happened in meetings, things that they experienced themselves. A lot of those stories made it into the book. Fictionalized, of course, and touched with humor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out The Christmas Clash?
I think the biggest challenge for me was how much Christmas did I want to put in the book? How much holidays did I want to put in? Because again, I'm used to writing non-holiday rom-coms, and so
Mhm.
what I decided, and good or bad, or whether if it's people's needs or not, I wanted it to be a holiday rom-com in the holiday season was kind of like is considered happy holidays time
Mm.
by Starbucks or by the school systems. There's this long period that starts somewhere in November, sometimes part of October, and it just stretches for a long time. I didn't want the book to only happen on Christmas Day. I didn't want it to only happen like in a 5-day period. I just wanted it really to be this holiday season. We did end up with a title that was very specific to Christmas, but the actual book, probably the most uh, like on the day scene where you see a feast and all that, you actually see Thanksgiving in that book. People around the table and whatever. So I wanted to just capture that, the essence of sort of, I call it this pumpkin spice latte effect in the book. Where, I don't know whether it starts in July after 4th of July or it's sort of actually in the October timeframe. But when Santa's stuff starts coming into the mall and Chloe's employed, it's at the end of October, early November. And so that's where I start the book.
Okay. So, what character did you love or hate the most in Christmas Clash?
I really enjoyed writing Elias. My daughter, she's 12. She's read the book. She and her friends actually read the book, which is a bit terrifying as they're 7th and 8th graders reading my book. But they also really liked Elias. Some of them call it Elias, which is also fine. I'm sure he would go by either name. He is he's gay, and he's a member of the LGBTQ community. This is the first time I've included somebody that's not you know cis hetero in my books, and I felt like I wanted to include that because I know that's in my daughter's life, my life, and it was time. And I was just happy that he was well received because I knew when I wrote that there was so much joy when writing him. And I had my agent also, he's do a sensitivity read. And so a lot of care went into that character. And sounds like a lot of people have really connected to him. And that makes me very happy.
Oh, that's great. So, what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Hopefully more books.
Hopefully.
We're wrapping up sort of the the final version of this book. So this will come out in April 2023. And it is it's a book that is not one that I necessarily have written this type of book before. It has because it has a second chance aspect to it. There's a main timeline and flashbacks. And so it's structured a little bit differently. The character's a little bit older. She's in her 30s. And so I really enjoyed kind of changing that up from what I currently write. I do try to do something new in every story, whether it's adding a new type of character or it's adding a new type of structure. And I think for this book, it worked out really well. And then after that, I have another book that I'm writing now, and I'm maybe a third of the way through. And I had to put it down for a bit because I was stuck on this plot hole, and I figured it out, and so now I'm back to writing again. But it was kind of weird because I was stuck. I couldn't move forward, so I kept revising what I was writing. And so my poor writers group saw the same version of the what I had sent them a few different times, but I had really wanted the beginning to be strong so it would set up the rest of the book because I had broken something in the book and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. It was challenging to get over that little hump and sort it out and then be able to write the rest of the book. But the thing I unlocked was thanks to my writers group. There, one of the members was like, "Oh, have you ever thought why this particular thing happened? Maybe it's X, Y, or Z." And it's something I hadn't even thought of. And it's clearly set up to be something that I should have seen but he pointed it out, and I now am like, you've unlocked my brain. Thank you. And now all of a sudden the words are coming out again. And so it was strange. For months I wasn't writing anything really new. I was just kind of spinning in the same 20,000 words.
So one of my questions is, were there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to other people that might have helped you with your writing?
With my writing, probably the thing that has been most consistent is attending a writers group every month. And I've tried a few out, and not that the previous ones were bad or anything. It's just that they either fizzled because of time commitments, or I had a different work schedule and was able to meet during the day, or had a different thing and was working and meeting them at night. And so this particular group, when the pandemic hit, we moved online, and that really helped. And we've stayed online because I think part of the challenge was just meeting in person, and the type of commentary and socialization we do, it works fine to be on Zoom. And I've tried out a few different ones. Ones were through Meetup. I think when I first started off, I was looking for writers group just on what was some of the other ones, like two on Meetup. I had one just like a writing, like there's a organization that was doing like weekly or monthly meetups, and I would meet people there and write sprint write with them as well. So I feel like if you put yourself out there and really seek your community, it's trial and error, but then eventually you find your people.
Okay. I have other questions for you about being a writer. What's your favorite part of being a writer?
I the most satisfying thing is writing the end on any project, whatever it is, whether it's a short form or long form piece. That really is the best feeling. But the best thing about being a writer would probably be when readers really connect to your book and get what you were trying to do. Because I've heard this podcast, Friends in Fiction, say, like, what's the book about and what's the book really about? And I love that question, because you have your, whatever the back cover copy says, or whether, or what, your, elevator pitch is. But then, like, what do you really want to get across to a reader is a kind of a different story. And so it delights me when I hear that somebody gets the fact that I tried to make this like, oh, it was fun and entertaining, and I got through it in a single sitting. I love hearing that, because that was all, again, intentional. But when you hear that, oh, I understood what this character was facing, and I appreciated you including more serious themes of dealing with racism, dealing with sexism in the workplace, whatever I've done and included on purpose, and they understood where I was going with it, because I try to make those things that I weave in, not like, so, hit the reader over the head with it, because I like to infuse things and weave them in and make sure at the end that they come to their own conclusion. I try to do that on purpose, and I really love it when somebody says, I see what you did and I appreciated it. Or even better, I am changing based on what you said. And I have had that happen. And I've had this conversation with a lot of librarians, actually, because I've just had a lot of librarian events in the past few weeks, where I say funny books can be meaningful too. And I think a lot of the time, and I have had this actual conversation with a Barnes and Noble bookseller, even when I walked into their store, I was telling them about this book, and they said, oh, my readers looking for funny books. And then, but everything out on the table are all these fantasies and very like issue driven books. A lot of trauma, that's what's out on the table sometimes, not necessarily at that particular store, but just in generally speaking, that's what's winning the awards. That's what are on the readers list and the year-end list. And I think that there are books out there that are humorous, that are also meaningful as well. And they try to incorporate the same types of themes, but maybe in a different way. And I would love to see more people kind of draw that distinction and, possibly incorporate more humorous reads into their recommendations, because
Mhm.
I think teenagers and young readers and adults really do want that.
Right. So, what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process?
Well, this past one was trying to figure out how to where I broke my plot and then why it wasn't working. Um, the hardest part, I think, used to be trying to kind of get a rhythm. And especially during the pandemic when things kind of went topsy turvy, it was hard to get into a rhythm. And then coming out of it, also, I had to get back into a rhythm with people going back to work and school and
Mhm.
in my family. It's just like kind of having to evolve and change around whatever the situation is that you have to find time to write. And so, like today, I know we were joking about this earlier before you started recording, but I mean, I had a flat tire, but I also wanted to write, so I brought my computer there. I was there for 2 hours, and I wrote a few hundred words in a tire shop. And that's not where I'd recommend anybody doing their writing, but sometimes you just to keep things consistent and keep, just make sure whether it's word count or you just want to write every day or whatever your goals are. It's just making sure you don't make excuses and kind of coming up with some reason why you can't do it. So at the tire shop, I asked for their Wi-Fi password and kind of got some emails done that were work related, and then just started writing where I'd left off the last time I logged in on Friday. And I mean, I wasn't as productive as you can imagine, but I did get words in, and I think just being consistent was hard to
Mhm.
do. But I had to kind of make myself do it just to make it more of a habitual thing.
Mhm. Okay. So, what was your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Oh my goodness, I've had so many. As I think when you debut in the pandemic, you appreciate things a lot more before and after the pandemic, especially, but even during. I think the um, gosh, one of the best things I think that's happened to me on the writer side was just being able to, see that people were trying to talk about my book, and I could talk about my book during the pandemic. It was so hard, but then out of it, I've been able to do live events, and um, that's just been great for me just to see people in 3D and meeting people in person, both readers and booksellers and librarians. It's just, I have really felt that that was something I didn't have for 2 years. And then now that I, am able to do more in person things, uh, even though it's a little scary because it's also been 2 years of not doing it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm now in an in-person conversation, and now I'm part of a panel. And you're like, I have to like wear non-pajama pants, and it's not just this and up. It's like you have to put on shoes. So there's things that are like funny about it, but I really love that opportunity. I think maybe if I debuted before the pandemic or the pandemic didn't happen, I don't know if I would have said like, oh wow, I really like all these panels that I've been on. Like I just came back from Nashville and I was on 3 panels. Um, I don't know if I would have appreciated it as much just to have 3 back-to-back panels, but I did. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
That's great. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
I have had to make peace with the fact that everybody's journey looks different.
Mhm.
I think it made it the most hard and difficult to learn, maybe because of how I started. When I got my first kind of like writing break, it was in a mentorship program that you get. It was called Pitch Awards. It no longer exists, but that whole program is based on people who aspiring authors who have a finished manuscript submit to potential mentors, and if you get picked, You get to be, kind of workshopped, and they help you edit, and then they help you write a query letter, help you write a pitch, and then you get to pitch your book to different, a wide range of agents. And for my mentors, I know my year that I applied, they had like over 75 applicants for their particular, for their to be their mentee. And, it's like 1 in 75 chance, right? That just seems so small. And the fact that I was able to get in was a miracle. And it was in 2016. And then I was in this group of people who were all aspiring authors, who all got picked by mentors, and we're all going to start this journey at the same time. And
Wow.
it wasn't until people started getting agents and people are getting book deals that you realize that even though you started at the same time, everybody's journey was completely different. Like, somebody got a 3-book deal right away, somebody got a movie deal right away. Some people got agents, some people didn't. And it was just wild to see that all these folks who started off, like at the same, like, starting line, and we're all running different races. And I think that is the thing that we didn't understand. I didn't understand, at least, that, this isn't the same race. It's actually, we're all on our own races.
Mm-hmm. So what piece of advice would you give to other writers?
I get asked this question, and I try to answer it differently every time, because I have some, things. I think there's a lot of different things I think about, and then I either change my answer or add to it. I think for the most current thing I've been thinking about is just to finish the project that you feel like you need to write. So I have friends that want to be authors, or people who want to, publish articles and things, and they just don't. They're talented and they're really driven, but they just don't finish the thing that they want to do. And I think, because whether it's perfectionism or it's just, time commitments or whatever, it's usually something that is prohibiting them. Maybe fear of failure. Again, I can relate to all these things. It's just getting to the end that I said is like the best feeling in the world. And then knowing that you're going to have to go back and revise it, but at least you are revising something that exists, versus dreaming about something that there's nothing on paper or nothing, on your screen. I personally end up writing terrible drafts, knowing full well that these are just words and placeholders, and it's basically like a long outline, and then I'm going to fill it all in the edits. And I think, depending on like whatever your system ends up being, I think that really is it, just to finish what you're writing. And you hear that a lot from authors saying that, but I really do think that what comes with that is just know that you don't have to fill in all the description. You can put like insert description here, or put in comparison of main character and sister here. You could put placeholders in, and to me they count as words, because eventually you'll change them, but you'll probably add more to those words. So I firmly believe in just getting the ideas down, get to your, make sure that it's a full story, and then get to the end, and then go back and fill it all in.
That's a great idea. I've never heard of that, but wow. Just insert little things like insert description here.
Yeah, because the little details aren't going to make or break your book. It's make sure you have the story figured out. You don't have to describe the forest yet. You can fill that in for sure later. You don't have to describe what the room looks like. You don't have to talk about what they had for dinner while they're having an intense conversation. You don't have to pick all that yet. You just say, like, it'll come later. And again, I count those as words. I think that's the thing, is like, all this counts toward word count in my mind, because eventually you'll fill it out and you'll for sure be more than what your little placeholder is. And so just keep going.
Great idea.
Get the core of the story in, and fill it all in your next revision. And I think my first kind of book was, really lean. I think it was 50,000 words, and I filled it out to be 55 when I sold it. That's The Perfect Escape. It ended up being like 63. But again, my rough draft was barely 50. And again, I did as much as I could to fill it in to be 55, which I thought was like impressive to add 5,000 words with all the things I was including, and all the descriptions I just said were placeholders. And then in the end, my editor worked with me, and then we ended up beefing it up even more and adding scenes and whatever. So again, it's just knowing that that is part of the process, and getting to the end is key.
Hmm. Wow. Um, okay, that's great.
Hopefully people will see this and learn from that. There's a lot of experience behind that thought.
Yeah, I had a question and it just went totally out of my head. Okay. So, what is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
I think a lot of people don't realize that I am actually introverted. I mean, some people can guess it or just figure that out, but because of I have a stand-up comedy background, and especially when I'm on a panel or that sort of thing, I feel very comfortable when I'm like, on a stage in a group. But when it actually comes down to it, I'm actually not. I consider myself an extrovert, and all the Myers-Briggs and all the personality tests also suggest that I'm an introvert. And so I do like my kind of time to, decompress and rejuvenate on my own. But I think sometimes I can come off as an extrovert, and so people assume that, and that's not always the case, actually.
Mhm. Yeah, I've heard from so many authors that they're introverts, and it kind of goes
Mhm.
with the job. I mean, because
Mhm.
it's such a
Yeah.
solitary job where you're sitting there by yourself and you're writing, except you're with your characters. You know.
Yes. Yes.
But
Exactly.
I remembered my question. So do you write an outline first, or are you more of a pantser?
Um, I started off more of a pantser. I don't think I would say what I write now is an outline. It's sort of a beefy synopsis. So I think the way I evolved was no outline, no anything, just making sure I had, and I still think this can work, and it does work. Um, just making sure you have your key milestones in place.
Mhm.
So, your inciting incident happens pretty early. In the midpoint, you need it not to be a saggy middle. So there's some sort of reversal or interesting thing that happens there. There's a climax, a point of no return downfall, and then, some sort of resolution at the end. That's enough to get a story going for me. And then, so that's how I used to see kind of getting just a story written and just to start drafting. But because I have contracts now and the editor wants to see what I'm working on, I usually write the pitch, and it's usually a few sentences long, maybe even, I think it can be as short as like one sentence, but maybe up to 3 or 4. And then from that point, sometimes they just want to know where the story is going to go. So you write a synopsis. And then from that, I usually am able to write the story for sure. But then the last one, the current one I'm currently writing, I needed to figure out a bunch of like parts of the story that make it make it flow better. And so I wrote it out, but it was very detailed. It's a very detailed synopsis. And so to me, that's sort of like outlining, but it's helpful, turns out, because then when I am trying to figure out what to write next, and I like open my computer after a weekend, I see what I need to write as my next scene.
Okay. So I have other questions about you as a person. What is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time for your hobbies and things that you love?
Ah, that's a good question, especially again, coming out of the harder part of the pandemic. It was like, what were you doing then, and what do you do? So in the pandemic, I was doing a lot of needlework and crocheting and uh, what is it called? The cross stitching. There's a lot of my cross stitching on uh, on Instagram posts, and crocheting came after. That was kind of actually more recent of a hobby. And I actually ended up with tendonitis because I was crocheting too aggressively. And so I had to go to the doctor, and they were like, "You need to stop crocheting, or just not be as angry about it or whatever you're doing." And so I ended up having to lay off of crocheting. I'm healed now, so I can actually do it, but I have to do it in a more relaxed, sort of leisurely way.
Mhm.
And so those were probably my biggest hobbies, I think, just to uh as like I like to watch TV or do something while I'm doing something with my hands. And so that worked out really well for reality shows, or like some show that I knew kind of like how it would go. Um, and was able to um, finish these craft projects. I also have been on the quest for the perfect chocolate chip cookie, and so that was something I've done for like 3 years, and and I got to a point where I'm pretty happy with the recipe. It's actually not that different from the Toll House recipe, which is kind of funny because I've tried like changing a bunch of things, and maybe that's the cornerstone recipe for a reason. But I browned the butter, and that has made a world of difference. And that is all I seem. That was like the thing that made it to me the perfect change to that recipe. So if you brown the butter, follow the Toll House recipe, you end up with like this delicious cookie that like I bring to every function, and everybody there you go like immediately.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So, while you're writing, um, do you prefer music or silence or what?
I prefer the ambiance of a tire store. Um, smell of rubber, people shouting. No, I actually think that I need silence usually. But my husband and daughter have also said I'm very good at tuning them out. So I think it doesn't matter if there's noise. I just can't do music. I know a lot of people love music, it gets them in a mood, but my brain wants to follow the lyrics. And so, especially if I know the song, I'll just kind of like my brain will like go to the song lyrics and go to the beat and not actually focus on what I'm doing. So it has to be, if I am listening to music, like background noise at a coffee shop, whatever, it has to be music that I either don't recognize, or it's like not catchy enough for me to like, go along with it. So I'm not a person who likes to write to music. I know, again, a ton of authors who do, and it's
Yeah.
just they have playlists and they get there's advanced things going on Spotify, and I'm like, I literally don't know any of that because I can't do that. My brain will want to be distracted. It will find every excuse to be.
Yeah. And do you have any favorite foods or drink or anything that you need to have with you when you're writing?
In the mornings, I do like having coffee. I was, and it's usually iced coffee if I can make it happen. In the morning. And then I know some people have snacks and things, but again, anything to distract me will happen. So I try not to have too many things around. I do prefer to draft and write on the dining room or the kitchen table. So I end up next to the snacks anyway. So maybe it's not like really a strategy per se, but I do reward myself if I, walk around and I grab some things. Um, but yeah, I think just a coffee or iced coffee in the morning usually just gets my brain going, and then I break for lunch, and then no specific snack though.
And then my next question, actually, you started to answer it, was what does your writing space look like?
So two areas that I write. One was the primary one, and it's if nobody's home. I like to write by the kitchen table. I think I've written by like not at a desk for my whole life. I used to study. I had a desk, and it just ended up being basically like a laundry basket, or or just like junk all over it. I don't know. My brain was not like seeing it as a place to write or work or do math or anything. And then in college, I used to do my studying on my bed. So it just was never what I associated with like a space to be productive until I was in the workforce. But so the dining room table slash kitchen table is where it's sort of more open and airy, and it's by the chargers and all the stuff. So it's, to me, it's just most convenient. So I prefer that space. But again, when the pandemic hit, I got kicked out of that spot. So I ended up working. I created a little nook in the laundry room, laundry area, I should say. And it's kind of this common space where it's like a digital piano, my little writing area, and then the washer dryer is right next to it. So I could get laundry done while I am doing my writing. And I walked away from that space, and then I had to come back to it recently because I think the dining table, my daughter was using it more for schoolwork, and then she's watching TV, and that's like right next to the TV. So I just kind of ended up migrating back. So I guess my current space is the laundry area. But again, I do have a desk there, and I just bought a monitor for the first time in my whole life. I'd been using my laptop, and my husband thought that was very sad. He's like, why are you an author? Like, you're trying to be a serious author, and you don't even have like a screen. And I said, well, I don't know. I just never thought to buy one. And so Black Friday came around, and I said, well, I should get one, but I don't know what to get. And he's a techie guy. So he gave me 3 options because he knows that I just wanted it done with. And I picked one, and it's great. And so he did a great job setting it up. It was like, easy plug and play type of situation. And it was $150, and I'm happy with it. And I did, and now I'm like, why didn't I get this before?
And you didn't have to put it on top of the laundry.
No, and it's on it. Yeah. I'm trying to remember if it's on a stand or I had to put it on something awkward that is just as bad. Like, I think it's on its own thing. But when I had my laptop propped up to be like a screen, and then I had my own like keyboard, he was just appalled because it was basically like, this is the screen, the laptop. And it was propped up on a box. It was like a mineral water box. It wasn't even like a legitimate stand. And he was like horrified. And he's like, what are you doing? So now it looks like a proper workspace. I even took a picture of it just to show him that I was like, look, I look like a real writer now.
Okay. Now, writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions who help them or hinder them through their work. And do you have any? And do they help or hinder you?
I don't have any pets that are of the dog and cat variety. I had them growing up, both dogs and cats, and it turns out I'm very allergic to most of them. So we decided not to have pets, although my daughter might be lobbying for a hypoallergenic one as she's getting a little bit older, so that's possibly going to happen, but we don't she hasn't asked for it lately. We do have hamsters. So the one that is with us now, her name is Daisy, and she's very adorable. She's also not very smart, and so she's adorable though. So she's like, but she gets stuck in things, and she's funny. And so we've had hamsters for 4 or 5 years now, and they're just enough, I think, for my daughter to be like, I feel like she has a real pet, and then it's fun to like watch this hamster do things. And she's a joy. And I have that also on my Instagram feed as well. I do post pictures of hamsters.
Okay, speaking of which, my last 2 questions. Where can people find your work? And this is where I always give a plug to Annie's Bookstop of Worcester. So you can get Suzanne's work at Annie's, and we can order her books for anybody if we can get a hold of them. And you can call us at 508-796-5613, or you can send us email at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can people find your books?
Um, well, the most easy place is my website. I have links to a bunch of things. So that's SuzannePark.com. And I have social media. I think some social media that I'm more active on would be Instagram. That's Suzanne Park. And then I have a main URL attached to that, and that's usually whatever's the latest book related thing happening, giveaways or special promos. And that's Suzanne Park. And then Twitter, I'm also Suzanne Park. And I think overall, I mean, the bookstores, there's so many indie bookstores that I just love to death, including yours. And just, yeah, support indies. There's so many that are, just emerging now. There's some that like Parnassus in Nashville is the one I consider like my hometown one in Nashville. And and then in LA, there's a bunch as well that I've been, Bel Canto Books in Long Beach. There's Rip Bodice in Culver City. There's Diesel Bookstore in Brentwood. There's just a ton of these wonderful bookstores that all have their own personality and flair. And booksellers are super great at recommending books and curating by your tastes.
Mm-hmm. Great. And you did kind of answer my last question, which is how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Yes, all those things.
All those
My social
things.
media and my website are probably the most easy to find.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of your incredible answers. I just love some of your ideas.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So anyway, it's been great. Well, thank you, Suzanne.
Nope.
And Suzanne Park, and it was wonderful speaking with you. And
Yes,
hopefully
thank you.
we will see you at our store sometime.
Hopefully. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me. It was a real fun time. And have the best holiday season ever.
You too. You too. Thanks.